Good morning. We are pleased to have here today with us Chagdud Khadro, who will offer some teachings here in Portugal by invitation of the Portuguese Buddhist Union. Chagdud Khadro became disciple of Chagdud Khadro Rinpoche, a great master of Tibetan Buddhism, in 1978, married him in 1979, and since Rinpoche's death in 2002, Khadro serves as the spiritual director of the Chagdud Gampo centers in Latin America. Chagdud Khadro lives in Rio Grande do Sul in Brazil, where she teaches and writes. Khadro,
thank you.
Happy to have you here today.
I'm happy to be here.
Welcome to Portugal. I would like to ask you, how did you discover the Dharma, and what made you begin your path on the Buddhist path?
I was traveling. I had been living in New York City for some years, working for various magazines as a researcher and doing freelance writing. And eventually, that life released me. I was able to buy a round-the-world air ticket, and I flew to Afghanistan. And 4 days later, there was a murder of a French girl in Afghanistan. And that was very immediate experience for me. And that shaking, that direct confrontation with impermanence sent me out of Afghanistan. And then I went to India, which I hadn't really focused on as a destination. I had other places in mind. And so in India, I went to Kashmir, and I traveled in Kashmir, trekked around. And then I went to Ladakh. And in Ladakh, I started meeting Tibetan Buddhists. And I had written an article about Alexandra David Neal, the first Western woman to reach Lhasa in 1924. And so I was interested in Tibetan Buddhism in that respect as an adventure. But there I started meeting people who were really practicing. And then I went to Dharamsala and then to Sopema, the holy place of Guru Rinpoche. And there I met a very great teacher, Lama Wangdor Rinpoche. And I started meeting people who are truly dedicated to the Dharma. And so set against the background of leaving New York City, encountering a violent death, which could have been mine, and then traveling alone in various places. Then when I got to Sopema, I was ripe for the teachings on the Four Thoughts, and they made immediate sense to me. I contemplated them not very deeply. I've contemplated them more deeply since then. But it was as if I had heard those before. And the sense of refuge, finding the place and the people that I really wanted to be with, that developed in Sopema. And so then I stayed there as long as my visa in India allowed me. Then I went to Bodh Gaya, and then I went to Nepal. And then 4 days later, I met Chagdud Rinpoche, and that was it.
Do you see your life experience, as you have told us here, in terms of a before and an after, in the sense of maybe the first half, I wouldn't say wasted, but very different and not so meaningful?
When I first came into the Dharma, I saw it that way. It was like before and after. But later, I saw the before was simply more chaotic, and there was always a thread there of wanting to benefit others. That they say that people enter the Dharma either through the door of compassion or the door of meditation. And I didn't have great compassion, but I had some compassion and a wish to benefit. But I had no meditation. And so when I entered the Dharma, it seemed like I had wasted a lot of time because I was 31 years old. But then later, I saw that all the skills that I had gathered in my worldly activities, like as a researcher and as a writer and as a person who had some social skills and some background knowledge, that was useful within the Dharma, and so I could bring it forward. It wasn't like it was trash to be thrown away. It was like a platform to offer.
Would you say it's an integral vision of your life experience? Would you say that?
I would like to say that, but there's such gaps in memory and experience, you know. It's really, when you go back and remember, you're just remembering the high points. And we've all had so many lives and so many experiences. It's like to remember yesterday fully and integrate it with today is the project.
You mentioned the usual two doors, so to say, how people get in contact with the practice, so to say. You mentioned compassion.
And
you
wisdom.
mentioned meditation, that's the word you... I was actually, I confess, I was hoping to hear another word, which is what I would like to ask you. Would there be another possible doorway, so to say, to the practice? Suffering? Can suffering be in whatever manifestation?
It depends on what you do with suffering. If suffering leads you to more compassion, deeper compassion, then yes, then it leads to the doorway of compassion. My suffering led me to a deep sense of impermanence, that nothing is stable, and so it's easier to leave my past life in New York City because a lot of things had happened there. It's said that it's really compassion and meditation, and those who enter through compassion, you need meditation to make your compassion pervasive, and those who enter just through meditation, they need compassion to make the meditation meaningful. Because there are whole realms of existence that are meditative realms, but they're not meaningful in terms of benefiting sentient beings.
Why do people come to you? And which would you say are their biggest sufferings or problems, and they seek you?
I meet many, many people. I meet the people who were gathered by Chagdud Rinpoche. I meet the people who are gathered by the other teachers who come to our center. It's like an ever-expanding sense of Sangha, and I meet people who are involved in various worldly projects. And so then the people who connect with me specifically, I have no idea, you know, why they have this karma. But what I try to do is to be a continuation of my own teacher's teachings, and so then that's valuable. There's nothing about me personally that I find extraordinary. I wasn't extraordinary as a child. I wasn't extraordinary in the Dharma. I was simply fortunate that Chagdud Rinpoche, for whatever reason, mostly compassion, took me under his umbrella of protection and gave me teachings. And so I feel like the custodian of that, and in that I have I'm a reasonable focus point. The biggest problem that I encounter in people is with practitioners, it's the need to integrate practice in daily life. They feel like they have only a limited amount of time to practice, and their ideal is the Tibetan yogi who really spends years in retreat, and not many of them have that karma, that ability, you know. So then in their lives, they need to know how to utilize their activity as a way to train the mind and make merit, and to create the circumstances to be able to do at least short retreats and longer retreats. But I meet many people who are have serious illnesses like cancer and they're preparing for death. I meet many people who are taking care of others who are either in old age or dying, and so I simply listen to them, and then from what I hear, I hope that I can provide some guidance. Sometimes it's a lot, sometimes it's a little.
You came to Portugal this time for a public conference, among other things. The theme is examining the mirror of death, finding meaning in life and peacefulness in dying.
Yes.
What can you tell us about this mirror of death? Why bring up this image of the mirror in relation with death?
First, I want to say this is my second time to come to Portugal. And the first time I came as a tourist, and there were many retreats going on, and I was like assertive that I wanted to see Portugal. And I'm really glad I did, because this is a beautiful and interesting country with a lot of history, a deep history. And living in Brazil, it makes my experience of Brazil richer. When I first heard the teachings from Chagdud Rinpoche on dying and the preparation for dying and the practice of transferring consciousness at the moment of death, and the teachings on the after death, bardas, those teachings were immediately significant for me, because I had experienced near misses with death 2 or 3 times, and I felt totally unprepared in those moments. And so I really gathered those teachings, and I organized Rinpoche's transcripts and wrote a book based on those teachings. And at first I felt like the teachings would give me some way to control the moment of death, but we're never sure. We're never sure when we'll die or how we'll die, or even if we'll be in control of our mind at the moment of death. You know, great meditators maybe have that confidence. The rest of us, we don't necessarily gain that confidence through these teachings. The confidence that we gain is that we'll know what to do next. If we lose control, then we know how to get back into the seat of mind. And that's very important, to develop a deep reliance on the teacher and the teachings, so that if you miss the moment of death, that in the after-death bardos, that reliance is almost like an instinct, an intuition, a reflex. Then the mirror of death is like the mirror of mind. Death is just, every moment is dying into the next moment. We use death as almost a metaphor for all of the events of mind. All the events of mind arise, display, disappear. They all have their moment of presentation. We have this life which arises from countless past lifetimes. We have our presentation. We dissolve, our elements dissolve. And so by using the metaphor of death, then we're better prepared to deal with reality as it is, this basic arising within the space of mind. So that's the mirror of death. And then the dramas of death, the stories, the accompanying those who are dying, the compassion we feel when someone loses their life in an untimely or violent or particularly cruel way. These really bring us to a deeper compassion for the state of sentient beings, that everyone is suffering, and these dramas of dying and death bring the heart to a deeper compassion, and that compassion becomes the priority. That compassion is a deep purification. that when we die, we don't lose that. It becomes a vector, a direction of mind. So we go toward either liberation or more compassionate rebirth.
You mentioned suffering again.
Definitely.
When we read about the theme of the conference, the examining in the mirror of death, and when we think of death in a general sense, we think of the physical ending of what we usually understand our life, how our life is. Is that a moment, a special moment?
It depends on how we die and who we are. There's the story of the last Karmapa, whose death, in an ordinary sense, was from a very painful cancer. And one of his disciples came into the room and just lost composure and started crying. And the 16th Karmapa had a smile that was like the rising sun. And he smiled and he said, "Don't worry, nothing happens." And so then if you have that kind of realization, when the elements fall apart of this body, the essence of mind is still present, and it was never lost, and the continuity is not lost for great beings. For the rest of us, it's when I talk to people, it's not so much death that they're afraid of. It's more like the decline of the illnesses at the end of life, the decline of cognitive capacity, the dependence on others, and how we reconcile that is really by deep practice. Just the aspiration, okay, however it is, may my presence on this earth be of benefit to some others. And so if you have that aspiration, even if you're totally dependent on others, then they're making merit. You have meditation that has interdependence with their innate mind. When Chagdud Rinpoche was in Brazil in 1997, he almost died of a heart attack. He was like really very, very nearly happened. They put him in a clinic and he's like, there sprouting wires and tubes and everything else that any of us would be totally fearful of. And he just has his mala in his hand, and the nurses are calming down and all the other people there are calming down. We would all like to do that as practitioners, to carry that kind of stability of intention into any situation. And so how it is, we can pray for the best, but great beings die of very serious and painful illness. They die in accidents. So if they die in that way in Tibet at the end, some of them died in prison and tortured. If they die in that way, then why do we expect we're going to die at home surrounded by loving friends, all praying for us? We have to be prepared for anything. And that preparation is in all the Dharma practice that we do in any tradition, from the very beginning of the Four Noble Truths right to the ultimate liberation. All Dharma prepares us for the cycles of birth, dying, death, and rebirth. And so the specific teachings I give are a way to prioritize in the mind, to rely more deeply on the teachings we already have, and then meditate.
What you were saying basically was Buddhist contributions to a healthier, in a sense, look at view on death and the death experience. Are there other contributions in the Buddhist tradition that you know of that you could tell us about?
First of all, even one of the remarkable things about the Buddhist tradition is that at the very beginning come the four thoughts and these profound teachings, and particularly the teaching on impermanence. If we contemplate impermanence thoroughly, then we have an entry into recognition of the empty nature of phenomena. And so that we see the arising and the dissolution of phenomena into emptiness. That really relates from the very beginning of the path to the teachings on death. And then in the Tibetan tradition, the specific teachings on the six Bardas is a very useful way to categorize impermanence. The yogic techniques of transference of consciousness at the moment of death. This is extremely useful, even if we're not able to accomplish it. It gives us confidence in our that we have this skillful means and this aspiration.
Are there any advices that you could give, either to people who are dying, or we are all dying in a sense, of course, but people who are most evidently in the process of dying, or to people who are accompanying those persons?
Two things. One is if we are accompanying someone who's dying, that we're seeing the deterioration of ordinary phenomena as we've defined it. Medicines and the interventions of phenomena, then we're limiting what we can do. And so if we look at the whole person, that inseparable with this phenomena is Buddha nature. We hold the view that the person is not just merely that dying body, but is in the process of releasing the physical phenomena and moving toward the moment of actualization of Buddha nature. Then that pure perception, holding that meditation and that recognition at the bedside of someone who's dying is really valuable. So we who are meditating, we need to know that it's not just what we do, it's how we are and how we perceive in a greater sense. And then loving kindness, practicing loving kindness in the situation, of course. But also, when someone is dying, if they can integrate compassion for others who are sick and dying in their dying process, then it releases them from that self-centeredness, which is a tendency. When we're ill, we tend to be, I am ill. We think, not only I am ill, but others have gone through this so many times, and I've gone through this so many times. May we all find liberation if that great-minded compassion arises in the person who's dying. Then they carry that across the threshold of death, and that becomes a great benefit in their future rebirth.
Thank you, Khadro, for your generosity in coming here and answering these few questions. Thank you all for joining us this evening.